A factory floor, machines moving faster than the eye can follow, no one speaking. A port, cranes the height of 20-story buildings, loading, always loading. A laboratory, young researchers, 3 in the morning, still working. A highway, 6 lanes, no traffic, built last year. In a city that didn't exist 10 years ago. A classroom, 40 children, silent, mathematics on the board. A drone, rising above a city of 15 million, no pilot, no hesitation. A steel mill, automated, 1 worker visible in the entire frame. A spacecraft, lifting from Chinese soil into orbit on schedule. A shopping app, 1 billion users, 1 click, delivered tomorrow. A military parade, missiles on trucks, soldiers in perfect lines. A man in San Francisco reads the news on his phone. He sets it down. He picks it up again. When did this happen? It didn't happen overnight. It took 30 years. And America was watching the whole time. In 2015, the Chinese government published a document. It was not secret. It was not subtle. It was a 10-year industrial plan, available in English, posted online, describing exactly which industries China intended to dominate and by what timeline. Artificial intelligence, semiconductors, electric vehicles, aerospace, robotics. Washington largely ignored it for 3 years. By the time anyone was paying full attention, China had already moved. Here is where the competition stands right now. 5 fronts, 5 industries, 5 reasons this is the most consequential economic rivalry in modern history. Front 1, semiconductors. The chip is the oil of the 21st century. Every smartphone, every weapons system, every data center, every piece of AI infrastructure, all of it runs on semiconductors. Whoever controls chip manufacturing controls the infrastructure of the modern world. The United States currently controls 2 choke points. The first, the software tools used to design advanced chips, dominated by American companies. The second, the extreme ultraviolet lithography machines that print the most advanced chips, manufactured exclusively by ASML in the Netherlands, which will not export them to China without American approval. Without these 2 things, China cannot manufacture cutting-edge semiconductors domestically. China is spending over $150 billion in state subsidies trying to change that. The United States responded in 2022 by restricting exports of advanced chips and chip-making equipment to China. It was the most significant act of economic warfare between 2 major powers since the Cold War, conducted not with armies, with export licenses. The outcome of this single competition will shape every other competition on this list. Front 2, electric vehicles. In 2023, China became the world's largest exporter of automobiles. This would have been considered impossible in 2010. China did not compete with Ford or Toyota on combustion engines. It would have lost. Instead, it leapfrogged the technology entirely, subsidizing electric vehicle development, battery manufacturing, and charging infrastructure for a decade before the global market shifted. BYD, Build Your Dream, is now the largest electric vehicle manufacturer in the world by volume. It sells cars at prices European and American manufacturers cannot match without destroying their margins. Its battery technology is integrated into products sold globally under other brands. Detroit spent a century building the world's greatest car industry. China spent 15 years building the industry that replaced it. The lesson is not about theft. BYD's technology was built, not stolen. The lesson is about what happens when a government decides, earlier and more decisively than competitors, where the market is going, and commits the resources to get there first. Front 3, artificial intelligence. China has stated, at the highest levels of government, that it intends to be the world's leading AI power by 2030. American companies currently lead on the most capable frontier models. GPT, Gemini, Claude. The fundamental research driving large language model development is predominantly American, but capability is not deployment. China has structural advantages that matter enormously at the deployment level. A population of 1.4 billion generates data at a scale no other single country can match. Regulatory constraints on data collection are substantially lighter than in the West. The state can direct AI investment with a speed and at a scale that market economies cannot replicate. In logistics, manufacturing, surveillance, agriculture, and healthcare, China is deploying AI systems at scale faster than most Western observers are comfortable acknowledging. The military implications are not theoretical. Autonomous weapons systems, AI-assisted intelligence analysis, cyber operations enhanced by machine learning, all of these are areas in which the competition is genuinely contested and the lead is not secure. Front 4. Infrastructure and global influence. China has built ports, railways, roads, and power plants across 60 countries. The Belt and Road Initiative is simultaneously four things at once: a genuine infrastructure program building things that genuinely needed to be built, a commercial strategy creating markets for Chinese contractors, a diplomatic tool accumulating relationships and obligations, and in specific cases, a mechanism for acquiring strategic position in ports and logistics nodes that have military as well as commercial value. Infrastructure creates relationships. Relationships create loyalty. Loyalty shapes votes in international institutions, access to bases, and the willingness to participate in or resist sanctions regimes. The competition for global influence is not fought with aircraft carriers alone. It is fought with construction contracts. Front 5. Space. China has a functioning space station. It has landed rovers on the Moon and on Mars. It is planning a crewed lunar landing before 2030. Its commercial satellite launch industry is competing directly with SpaceX for international contracts. When American companies were moving factories to Guangdong in the early 2000s, China's space program was impressive but clearly behind. It is no longer clearly behind. The gap has closed. In some specific areas, it has closed entirely. In a small number of areas, China has moved ahead. Space is not primarily about prestige, though prestige matters in international politics in ways that economists underestimate. It is about the technologies that space programs generate and the strategic capabilities that satellite constellations provide. Navigation, communications, intelligence gathering, and the ability to deny those capabilities to adversaries. The race that America thought it had won in 1969 has restarted. The other side has arrived at the starting line. 5 fronts: semiconductors, electric vehicles, artificial intelligence, infrastructure, space. In every single one of them, China was behind 20 years ago. In every single one of them, it is no longer clearly behind today. This is not a trade dispute. This is a restructuring of global power. And to understand how it happened, you need to understand one man, one factory, and one decision made in Ohio in 2001. The email arrived on a Tuesday. Mark Holloway had been expecting it for 6 months. He is 52, a manufacturing engineer from Ohio who spent 22 years helping American companies move production to China, finding the right factories, negotiating the right contracts, managing the supply chains that connected the Midwest to the Pearl River Delta. He was good at his job. He believed in what he was doing. The email was from his largest client. They were ending the contract, moving production back to the United States. New tariffs, new political pressure, new anxiety about supply chains inside a country your government now describes as a strategic rival. The thing is, Mark says, sitting in his kitchen in Columbus, I knew this was coming. The factories got better, the engineers got better, the ambitions got bigger. And at some point I realized I wasn't just helping American companies manufacture in China. He pauses. I was watching China learn everything American companies knew and then use it to compete with them. In 1978, China's GDP per capita was approximately $200. The country was emerging from the Cultural Revolution, a decade of deliberate destruction of expertise, education, and institutional knowledge. Most development economists would have described the economic situation as irreparable in any near-term timeframe. Deng Xiaoping looked at this situation and made decisions that altered the trajectory of human history. He opened special economic zones. Shenzhen was the first, a fishing village adjacent to Hong Kong, designated as an experiment in capitalism within a communist state. Foreign companies could invest, private enterprise could operate, the market could function in a contained geography while the political system remained intact everywhere else. The experiment worked faster than anyone predicted. Shenzhen today is a city of 17 million people, the hardware capital of the world. More consumer electronics are designed, prototyped, and manufactured here than anywhere else on Earth. Its transformation from fishing village to global technology hub took 40 years. No city in human history has grown faster. The broader transformation followed the same logic at continental scale. China built more concrete between 2011 and 2013 than the United States built in the entire 20th century. It has more high-speed rail than the rest of the world combined, 45,000 kilometers of track. It lifted approximately 800 million people out of poverty in 40 years, the largest poverty reduction in human history, by a margin that makes every other development success story look incremental. Mark was part of this. His clients were part of this. The American consumer who bought a cheaper television, a cheaper appliance, a cheaper piece of clothing, they were part of this too. The question Mark carries is when the partnership changed character, when the student became the rival. There is no clean answer, but there is a document that matters more than most. Made in China, 2025, published in 2015, public, available in English. A roadmap describing precisely which industries China intended to dominate and by what timeline. Washington largely ignored it. For 3 years, the competition between the United States and China is not a problem with a clean solution. It is a condition, and understanding it clearly requires resisting 3 inadequate framings that dominate the public conversation. The first inadequate framing: China's rise was theft. Intellectual property theft by Chinese state actors is real, documented, significant. The FBI has described it as the most sustained, large-scale theft of intellectual property in human history. Cyber attacks originating from China have penetrated American defense contractors, technology companies, and government systems at a scale that represents a genuine, ongoing security problem. But attributing China's transformation primarily to theft misses the larger story. China has also produced genuine innovation in battery technology, in high-speed rail engineering, in solar panel manufacturing, in certain areas of AI research. Huawei's 5G technology represents real engineering achievement. BYD's electric vehicles are genuinely competitive products. These were not stolen, they were built. The second inadequate framing, decoupling, is straightforward. Mark's clients discovered this when they tried to move production back to Ohio. The supply chains built over 30 years were not simply relocatable. The tooling, the supplier ecosystems, the workforce skills, the logistics infrastructure, all of it was in China because China had spent 30 years optimizing for exactly this kind of production. The iPhone is the most visible example. Apple has been trying to diversify its supply chain away from China for years. It has moved some production to India and Vietnam. It remains fundamentally dependent on Chinese manufacturing for its core products. Dependency built over 30 years does not dissolve in 3. The third inadequate framing: the competition is purely adversarial. The United States and China are simultaneously strategic rivals and each other's most significant trading partners. American companies sell hundreds of billions of dollars of goods and services in China annually. The two economies are entangled in ways that make complete separation not merely difficult, but by most serious economic assessments, mutually catastrophic. This does not mean the competition is not real. It means the competition is happening inside a relationship that neither side can simply exit, which makes it more complex and more dangerous than a straightforward rivalry between separate powers. We spent 30 years building something together, Mark says, and now we're trying to figure out how to compete with what we built. That's not a trade problem. That's a strategic problem we should have been thinking about 20 years ago. The United States is not losing. That needs to be said clearly, because the discourse around American competitiveness sometimes slides into a catastrophism the evidence does not support. American universities remain the most attractive research destinations in the world. American venture capital funds more frontier technology development than any other system. The dollar remains the global reserve currency. American military capability remains the most formidable on Earth. The alliance networks, NATO, Japan, South Korea, Australia, India, give the United States a coalition weight that China, whose major partnerships are with Russia and a small number of dependent states, cannot yet match. The CHIPS Act, $52 billion in semiconductor manufacturing subsidies, is the most significant American industrial policy since the space race. New chip fabrication plants are being built in Arizona, Ohio, and New York. The Inflation Reduction Act has triggered hundreds of billions in private clean energy investment. These are real responses, producing real results. But the competition is not a problem to be solved. It is a condition to be managed. Over years, over decades, through administrations of both parties, through economic cycles and technological shifts that cannot be fully predicted. China will make mistakes. Its property sector crisis, its demographic decline, its difficulties attracting foreign investment. These are real constraints on a trajectory that is powerful but not inevitable. The United States will need to decide, clearly over time, not just what it is competing against, but what it is competing for. The answer can not only be semiconductors and export licenses. It has to include something about what kind of world American power is trying to produce, and why that world is worth the effort. On a Wednesday morning in Columbus, Mark Holloway opens his laptop. New client, a medical device company, entirely dependent on Chinese suppliers for a component that turned out, during the pandemic, to be more strategically important than anyone had realized when the sourcing decision was made a decade earlier. They want to change that. Mark has been in this business for 22 years. He knows how hard it is. The workforce gaps, the supplier gaps, the regulatory timelines. He also knows, because he spent 22 years watching China do exactly this, that it is possible. China didn't build what it built because it was inevitable, he says. It built what it built because it decided to. Because it made choices consistently over a long period of time about what it wanted to be. He looks at the proposal on his screen. That's not a Chinese lesson. That's just how this works. He starts typing. Outside, Columbus is doing what mid-sized American cities are doing across the country, trying to figure out what comes next, what they make, what they're for. In an economy being reorganized faster than the institutions governing it can comfortably track. The race has no finish line. It never did. It just took a while to notice that someone else had entered it.